Howdy-ho, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Camp Bedrock 2.0 Rebuild. In this video, we are diving back into the electrical system, and specifically, we're going to be hooking some wires up. As you can see, I pulled some wires from the hood to back here, and we've got some grounds, and we've got to get the battery secured. By the end of this video, we hope to have most of it wired, or at least wired ready. We're not going to have our solar panels yet, but we want to be able to get our truck back on the road. We've now had several weeks while we're working on this build that we've had the batteries disconnected. Well, Wilma's just sat here, and while she doesn't really need to go anywhere, I want to have a truck back and a truck ready. So here we go with all that right now.
First things first, we got to start in the cab. So we got to rewire this box that we used for our ARB fridge. It ran off of our 12-volt battery system for the truck. We need to now allow it to be able to be switched so that we can run it off of the battery system that is now in the bed of this truck.
Like Alana said, we're going to start here. I don't think this is going to be a huge modification. I've always had this little box in here that ran from, this was the supply that came straight from the truck battery. The new thing I'm adding here is this new red cable hidden back here. That's actually coming from the distribution box hooked to the new system. So in order to have these two things run on the same thing, I need to add in this three-way switch. So the way this worked before was I used to just have an on-off switch here. So I had no power coming to this box from the battery, or I had power coming to the box from the battery. When I turned it on, I powered two USB ports here. It's also, that center section is a panel meter as well, and then that plug runs our fridge freezer. It's going to work much the same way, but now I'm going to use this this three-way switch. So not a typical use of the three-way switch though. So the way this would traditionally work is that you would have a source coming into the center pin, and then you would power device A on the top or device B on the bottom. I'm going to actually do this the other way around. I'm going to have source at A or source at B, and then when I turn one of those on, it will go out that center pin. So this center pin is what's going to connect to the USB and that 12-volt port, and then I'll have two different sources, one from truck battery, one from the 12-volt system in the back. Now, the other pin here is a negative, and the purpose for that negative in this switch is there's two little LEDs you can see there. I will not be able to use those because I will have a 12-volt source, at least most of the time, unless I add another switch in the truck bed or under the hood or something. I would have 12 volts here all the time, and I don't want those LEDs. While a small drain, I don't want them on all the time. I don't think that's a huge deal because, as I mentioned, I've got a little panel meter, a little meter in the center section of this little USB. That's what that window is for in this cover. So even when the cover's up, I can see it come to life. The little meter will light up there and say, wee, 12 volts or something like that. So once all done, I'm going to try to mount this in this little spot right there. Okay, there we go. All mounted up. I am pretty happy with it. I did make a little bit of a boo-boo scratch when I put the cover in, so I'll touch that up. But I did hook the truck back up. So, like I said, I couldn't use the LED on the switch, but the panel meter, the little meter comes on. I think that's going to be good. Obviously, on the up position, the wires run to the back, but it's not hooked up to anything yet. So that is off. All right, on to the next thing.
Transitioning back into the bed of the truck, we have removed the inverter so that we could do a lot of wire pulls from the front of the truck or from the cab of the truck for some of these other projects. And I thought I'd go over what all I have here and what it will do. So the first thing is this wire here. This is the wire that actually goes in from here. So when I want to power that box inside the cab that I just finished up, this is that wire that will power that box. It's actually the leftover. This was the cable that I had powering the tent, so it's a little bit of gauge overkill. But one thing I would say when you're working with DC versus AC, I see a lot of people start to wire their car and they use wire sizes that would be good for your home, and that gauge doesn't necessarily work out, or that gauge mapping doesn't work out exactly. So whenever you're wiring with a car, you're wiring with a DC circuit, you have to take into account the voltage and the run distance also with the current. So when you're going from, say, the front of the vehicle to the back of the vehicle with some verticals and bends, you're talking about 15, 20 feet. A lot of times with a 12-volt circuit, you have to run a lot thicker gauge wire. To that point, another set of wires here is this is 6 gauge for a 30 amp charger. So this is actually going to hook directly up to the battery. When the alternator is charging the battery, that increase of voltage will activate this device, and then it will start charging the batteries from that circuit. For 30 amps, 6 gauge seems like a lot. But when you take into account the 15/20 foot of cable run that I'm going to have, it's actually just the right size. Another cable that I have down here is just a physical ground. While I've connected to the ground on the battery, I'm running a non-isolated charger off of the alternator, and that means I want to make sure that the chassis of the truck is my neutral everywhere I go. So this actually actually connects directly to the frame underneath here. For an additional chassis ground, and everything again goes back to directly to the battery. The last cable that's sort of coming in here, or it's not sort of, it is this. It may look like DC because it's red and white, but that's just the jacket color. So this is like an SOOW type cable, or an extension cord type cable that's rated for automotive and outdoor use. It happens to be a 12 gauge cable. Again, I just wanted to go ahead and have wire that I didn't have to worry about. This powers the AC that is in the bed when I'm going to be making it with the inverter or from shore power. So I've cut the end off where I'll be able to strip it back and make it back into, this will connect into that 3-pole switch AC circuit that I mentioned. So anyway, all those wires, the stake pocket was already here in the truck and offered plenty of room for access, not only for the wire, but we actually were able to pull it with this plastic wire loom to protect it the entire length from the hood or from the bed of the truck. It actually stays completely jacketed in that wire loom. We brought it through here, and I've done just this little loop of these loose wires. I'm now ready to mount the inverter up. I'm going to push my batteries aside for now so that I can get these wires around the inverter and start to run my loom along the center portion of this board. And then once I make sure that I've got enough room through here, I'm going to bring the batteries back in, and then we've got some aluminum. We're going to lag them down to the floor with a strap. So that's all the work we're getting ready to dive into right now. Well, this is where I'm going to stop for the evening. I actually I messed up, and I don't have all the wire that I want, or I didn't have enough wire to come off of the solar panel, and then my one positive wire off of the charger that'll be from the alternator. I didn't have enough to run back and over to the Lynx module, so I've got to stop for that anyway. And it's getting pretty late. I've got everything pretty well tidied up. The large wire ended up being 4 gauge for the inverter. That is all run. I've got a ground pulled for that as well. The top wire that's hanging up top there, that's that extension cord like cable for the AC. I'm going to deal with all of the AC wiring after I get all of the DC done. That little hoop up, you can see the painter's tape I've got in there. That is my minimum clearance for the battery, so everything will tuck up and not come in contact with the battery. So as soon as I get my other wire, I think I've probably got just a few more hours. Did get the distribution panel in and now mounted as well to run all of the accessories. So moving along, but that's it for tonight. Well, where we left off with the wiring that you can see up there now was before our Everglades trip, which we played a little bit of hooky from the project, went and did some exploring down there, and then nice warm weather. Well, today we're finally back in the shop. We've got the wire that I was missing to complete that job, and that's where we're really picking up here today. So the goal by the end of the day is to get everything physically wired up, get the batteries mounted, and then start to actually turn these things on and get the system working. So fingers crossed. Okay, I miscounted. So I've paused here in the back because I'm missing one lug to finish up the last connection there. So rather than just run into the hardware store, Alana and I decided to go ahead and finish up with what we've had not quite finished under the hood for quite some time. So all this cable over here this is the 6 gauge wire that is running all the way into the bed of the truck for the converter charger. So when we're running down the road, and I need to make a connection here to the battery for that. So what I actually have here is this little circuit breaker bracket I made under
under here. This used to feed the rooftop tent cable, so I had this 30 amp circuit breaker here, and then this other cable that's kind of hidden down here with the fuse. That is what actually runs into the truck, the back of the truck cab. Remember that box that switches both ways? So directly hooked to the battery, if I just want to run off a truck battery, is that cable with the fuse. And then I need to replace this circuit breaker with a much larger circuit breaker. Luckily, we were able to find the exact size circuit breaker as the one I was using prior. It's just I think it's a 60 amp, I'm not sure, but anyway, I need to get that unbolted and then cut this loom back, get all this cable secured under the hood, and then under the hood will be completely done. Okay, well, there we go. Under the hood is all now complete. The swap of that circuit breaker really was pretty simple, other than just dealing with this now much larger cables. My negative, I connected over, come on camera, focus. My negative I connected over here. This is where this is actually a negative post on the truck right there. That's where all of the major grounding happens. I did not connect that negative directly to the battery. And another reason is in the past I've gone to connect negatives here like to this, but this is the battery sensing module for the truck, so it's what's going to say, hey, your battery's low, and give you some warnings like that. Also rundown protection, and I just didn't want to mess with these connections for that. So the positive then from the circuit breaker, and then I did have to modify the cap a little bit. I had to cut a little slot with a little bit of a hole for this larger gauge. The thinner gauge I was able to keep underneath that, but this heavier stuff with the lug I wasn't able to. So back to the bed. I think it's time for us to get the batteries mounted. Okay, now that we're done under the hood, we're going to go ahead and switch back here. We haven't yet gone to the hardware store to get some of the lugs that we need, but we figured we'd go ahead and get the batteries mounted. What we're thinking for mounting the batteries is it'll go like this. Now, I know in other videos, maybe even sooner in this one, we had talked about mounting these batteries sort of side to side or coming out from the truck like so. And the reason that we were thinking about doing this is it makes a real nice parallel run for the battery connections, but it also leaves room for a third battery. And without insulation, we're going to be putting some insulation between these batteries, but without insulation, we could even maybe squeeze a fourth. But right now, we're starting just with two. So we're going to go ahead and mount these up like so with some aluminum rail. I've got a little bit of this aluminum angle iron. I'm going to cut that, lag it down to the floor, and then I'm going to ultimately put a little bit of a slot in this piece here of the aluminum, and then we're going to have a ratchet strap or a strap that will go over the top of the batteries to hold them down to the wood. So that's what we're going to get into now. Okay, so batteries out, and this is what I was talking about. The insulation, it's not actually insulation. So this is like gym mat flooring or foam stuff that you can get at the hardware store for like an exercise room or something. It's really pretty cheap. It's right at a 1/2 inch thick, and that's going to be perfect to slide between the batteries and then on every face here. So we're going to end up sticking that all the way around this before we secure it in the truck. But before that, we did not buy heated batteries, and with any LiPo battery or any lithium battery, they just don't charge and work well when it gets in really cold temperatures. And with the insulation and some of the things we're doing, that's exactly when we would really like to be able to get out with the truck and use it. So rather than buying the heated batteries, I ended up getting I think 6 of these little Facon, I think is the brand, F-A-C-O-N. This is actually intended to be used for like an RV downpipe or the 1.5 inch or a larger piece of PVC. You would kind of stick this around the elbow and everything, but I'm actually going to use these to stick directly to the battery like so. We're going to start with putting one on the two sides, front and back, the long side of the battery, and we're hoping between that and the foam that'll be around it, it'll give us enough heating to be able to charge really even in cold temperatures. The reason I went with these really came down to the wattage.
These little units are only a 4-watt heater, so even when I have all of them, I'm going to have very little drain to make sure that I'm keeping my batteries warm. Disadvantage to these versus getting a battery that is heated, or even getting some different units, is they are not thermostatically controlled. So I'm going to have to make sure I either get a thermostatic switch or make sure that we put them on a switch that we remember to turn on and off. Anyway, time to stick these things on and make a little battery box.
Okay, where I think we've met another stopping point. So almost everything is wired up, and as you can see, the batteries are in. Down here in the corner, you can see basically I put a little slot in the side of this before I put it down, and there's a little rubber edge protection thing down there, and then there's that wrap all the way around it. On the corners and then here on the top, I just took a few pieces of gaffer's tape, and the aluminum is bent in all the way around those sides. So the final piece with that little slot that was on that side and on this side is we got this strap here. And it's still just a wee bit loose, but even at that, like when I give these things a shake, I'm moving the whole truck. So I'm really pleased with the way the batteries are held in there. Then I'm going to have to wire this. This will all be basically paralleled together. These are those little heaters, those little plumbing heaters to keep the batteries warm. The wiring for those and everything there. I'm missing a few terminals. I seem incapable of ordering everything that I need all at once, so I can't quite finish my battery connections here, but I do have it through the switch and through the shunt, and like I say, I'm also missing just a few terminals to wrap up over here as well. So I thought this was going to be a great idea here to have these cables be kind of pointing right at it and short, and that was a horrible idea. If I ever do this again, I'll give myself a little bit more room, because making cables that doggone short was a pretty big pain in the keister. But everything's coming together pretty well. But I think we've hit a stopping point for tonight.
So after visiting all of the local farm supply and auto parts and hardware stores in the area, we were unsuccessful in finding any more additional lugs to be able to finish tidying up the components behind us. And we have a lot of other work in other areas of the truck to get it ready for the topper. So we're going to end the video here for this week. Stay tuned to see what we plan to do with the rest of it. Subscribe, like, do all of that. See ya.